All right, and we are live. Welcome to Winterviews, Series 4, Episode 5. I'm your host, Catherine Silva, Cat for short. This is Lemon Jelly. He's just here. And tonight we have Rebecca Cuthbert, who is an editor extraordinaire, author extraordinaire, wears many other hats, I assume, because you seem to do it all.
I do a lot, but it's not organized, so it's not done well.
I mean, I beg to differ. You seem like you've got it all figured out.
That's a lie.
The organized chaos at least seems, not crazy chaotic. It seems awesome and amazing. So
thank you.
We're very happy to have you on the show this evening.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. I mean, I'd been meaning to do it because it just I don't know why I didn't do it sooner, honestly. It's
there are a lot of people, a lot of people out there. And this is Barnaby, and he's going to ruin the shot several times.
All right.
Just to get his introduction out of the way, because he's trying to climb all over me.
Yes, cats and horror authors, a combination made in heaven.
We call him the Ginger Nightmare because he's horribly behaved.
I mean, yeah, I like right now, Lemon Jelly's being good, but earlier, not the case. He's been placated with hot chicken, so that's part of the allure right now. The only other thing that might happen is if he accidentally, has an accident, which could happen. So just putting it out there, guys. So tonight we get to talk about monsters, and that is just a subject that, maybe not quite a subgenre of horror, but certainly a very important facet for a lot of horror, and definitely a fun one to crack open. And we'll be talking about, all kinds of monsters tonight, though I do have to ask, when you were kind of coming up with the pitch idea for the subject, had you meant like a certain kind of monster, or were you just hoping to sort of cover
monsters in general? Because I think that's why they're so fun, is because there's such a variety of monsters, and I feel like everyone has their favorites, but almost no one doesn't like any monsters, if that sentence made sense.
Yes, it very much did.
Yeah, they have a broad appeal is a better way to say that.
Yeah. Who doesn't like monsters in their horror movies? That's definitely a hard one not to believe that anybody would not like that. I also just realized that I totally skipped over the very crucial question of, would you please introduce yourself to our audience?
Oh, sure.
And tell them a little bit about yourself.
Sure. My name is Rebecca Cuthbert, as the screen says. And I am an author of horror, but like dark fiction and poetry is probably a better way to describe it, because it's not all horror and it's not all horror-y horror. Some of it is literary, some of it's dark magical realism, stuff like that. Weird tales, strange tales. I am the editor-in-chief at Undertaker Books with a couple of partners, DL Winchester and Cyan LeBlanc. Love those guys. I teach writing classes at the closest state university to me, SUNY Fredonia. What are my other hobbies? Obviously, I like to read a lot. I like to hang out with my husband, Joel. I volunteer at the local dog shelter. I like to garden, and I like to cook, and I like to can salsa and pickles and stuff like that. So I think that wraps me up. That's my life in a nutshell.
There's a lot of fun hobbies. Canning is something that I have always wanted to do, but can never get organized to do it. And I think that it seems like a lot of fun anyway.
Yes and no. Like I like it. Obviously, I've been doing it for years and years. But one of my friends came over this summer because he wanted to learn how to make jam, and we're like pouring sweat, and burning ourselves because you're just going to do it. You're going to burn yourself all the time. And he's like, "Why do you do this? Like, this is terrible." But he was only half serious, but he was a little bit serious because it's really hard and you do burn yourself a lot. But it's so awesome to make food, and it's so awesome to give people presents that you made. I love that. Mm-hmm. And like, maybe if I could do other things, I would, but like, I can't quilt, I can't sew, I can't crochet or knit. I'm not like a very good crafter, so like, food is my thing.
Yeah. The comment here, I'm just gonna put this up here. Canning is similar. I can't knit or crochet or do any of those things either. But
you can write the hell out of some books.
Yeah, well, you can too.
Thanks, bud.
Sorry, just changing position here. So I guess that means that something that needs to happen is probably a canning horror story.
I have not written one yet. But the thing all of us canners fear botulism.
Yep.
And so I could definitely write a botulism horror story. But I stay away from like I know people who can meat. Ooh. And like, I'm not messing with meat canning because, first of all, it seems super dangerous. And you need a pressure canner to do it. And I only do boiling water canning because I am a huge klutz. Like, I have burn marks all over my hands and arms from like cooking, baking, canning. I'm not messing with a pressure cooker because I would blow my face off.
Oh,
so like jam, pickles, salsa, applesauce, like those are fairly safe. I know how to do them, and I know how not to poison people. But botulism would be that's going to be an antagonist in a future story. So thank you for that.
Yeah. I now have a new fear for canning that I did not have before. Maybe it's a good thing I didn't pick it up.
I mean, it's like, you know that saying, like, you can't eat at everybody's house. like you shouldn't trust everybody, And so that's, I think, just if a friend gives you like a jar of salsa they made, like, make sure you trust your friend. That's all. People trust me. My friends trust me. They like the salsa, but
ask them 10 questions about the origins of the salsa and
how long did you boil this for? Quiz them.
When was this made?
Yeah.
How has it been stored? Well, check the seal.
Now we're just getting way into canning. Sorry, everybody.
No, it's great. We're gonna move from canning into monster horror now, which, again, maybe that will be the start of a new story at some point.
So I love research. Like, I'm kind of a research nerd. Mm-hmm. And so I started, like, I was just like looking up monsters and the different ways people think about monsters. And so that led to like all these different ways to classify monsters, like the different sort of categories. But I didn't love all of them. So then I made my own. And then it got really messy. So like, no one can read this, but like, that's what I got to start on.
Oh my goodness.
It was fun though. It was like fun to consider, like, And then it's fun because as far as my categories go, things like zombies and kaiju, like it depends sort of like their origin story will depend on where they go will depend on their origin story.
Sure.
Like zombies, for example, sometimes you get like contamination, illness, zombie origins.
Yep.
And then sometimes you get like supernatural curses, you know?
Yep.
So
that's true. Yep.
So yeah, it was fun, and then it quickly like just it jumped the shark, you know?
It turned into that, you know, that maybe a thread here to the
the conspiracy theorist wall.
Yep. Yes.
It turned into that real quick.
No, that's how I take notes too. So, and I get really excited and it just goes insane. So I appreciate that page very much.
Thanks.
And I asked you I had a lot of, you know, I don't know, somewhat thought-provoking, difficult questions that I sent you. So I know that there was a lot to consider. So with that in mind, if I can find my phone, which I have the questions on.
Sure. I'm ready.
We're gonna start with our opener, which is a question about, well, it didn't open my photo in time. Here we go. Please stop, demon. What is it about monsters or creature horror that made you want to choose it as today's subject?
So for this, I have 3 main reasons. Okay. One is broad audience appeal, that everyone likes one type of monster or they find it interesting or entertaining. You know, there's so many different types of monsters out there. So lots of variety, lots of appeal. The other thing is that I think monster narratives are like evergreen. We've never stopped liking them, right? Like since we've been telling stories around campfires, we've loved monster stories. And we still love them. And we're always going to love them. And then 3, I love that you could, if you want to, you could sort of like pull monster stories apart as a scholar and like look for themes and like look for different representations and like what aspect of society are which monsters representing and all of that. But then you can also just like watch them or read them or write them for fun. Like you don't have to get deep with it. You can just enjoy a monster story because they're fun.
Agreed. Yeah. There's different layers and levels to a lot of monster stories. And really monster stories can be any subgenre. They can entail any subgenre in horror or you know, even just speculative fiction, which makes it a pretty fun topic to discuss.
Yeah. I had a sub bullet to one of those.
Okay.
And now it's just like it's left my brain. But it was something about its broad appeal. But I lost it. I'll see if I can get it back.
That's okay. Maybe it'll come back with my follow-up question, which is what draws you toward writing and reading horror where monsters take a central role in the main character's story?
Okay, well, first I just remembered my thought.
Cool.
Say that.
Drop my phone on the floor.
Oh, I thought it was your cat. I was like,
no, he's right here. He's good.
He's on the other side. So it was that. So you know how, of course, you know how a lot of people out there know how if you say horror, like people freak out and they're like, ew, you know, like they just like like the word turns them off. They're like, oh, scary, no.
Yeah,
but if you were like, do you like witch stories? Do you like ghost stories? Whatever, they'd be like, oh yeah, I love those. You know, like they don't realize like how giant of an umbrella the word horror is.
Yep.
But anywho, I think that monster stories are like a good little gateway drug almost, like into horror.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's like, do you like the classic movie Jaws? It's like, okay, yes. Then you can
Mm-hmm.
get people into it, you know? It's like a way into the world of horror that doesn't scare people off.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it's a gateway drug.
Mm-hmm.
I know for a fact that creature feature horror is one of the reasons that I got into horror. And it was because of movies like Jaws, and Tremors was a big one.
Tremors is on my list. That's so fun.
Yeah. And Lake Placid, I think was another one.
Mm-hmm.
That was just like, there was an allure of these like giant animals as monsters.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's really easy to be hooked by that.
It is. Okay, and I forgot the next question already because my
That's okay.
I have a goldfish brain.
The question was, is there something about monsters in particular that makes you want to write them as kind of like a main facet for your narrative?
Well, so I was in preparation for this conversation. I was kind of like looking over my work and what I have for monster stories, and I have like maybe 7 or 8 monster stories. I'm not counting ghosts right now, everybody. Okay, I'm counting ghosts. They're not on my monster chart, so they're not here. Okay, but I really like creature features. I really like creature features as eco horror.
Mm-hmm.
Like that really works for me. And then I also really love comedy horror. So I think that monsters like make such good, like one of my stories is about an English department at a college hiring zombies as adjuncts, like firing the adjuncts they have to pay and hiring zombies instead. And then of course it just goes to hell and everybody starts getting eaten.
Nice.
But so I think they're funny, and I love comedy horror, and then I love eco horror. So those have been like my 2 sort of points.
Nice.
My points of personal access into writing these. And I have stuff I want to write, but I know that that's coming later. I know that's a question, so I'll save it for that time.
Full disclosure, I have not finished reading your newest collection yet. I'm about 6 or 7 stories in, and
this one, everybody,
6 O'Clock House and Other Strange Tales is new from Water Tower Hill Publishing. Definitely a like super fun so far. I'm really digging it. And y'all should pick it up here.
Thank you. So I don't think you've gotten to the cats yet.
I have not gotten to the cats yet. But the fact that I now know that there are cats coming up is extremely exciting for me.
Yeah, we've got a cat. We've got a cat situation.
There haven't been too many monsters so far, but this does bring me to my next question, which is that a lot of the monsters, if you will, that we have met so far in this collection are of the more human variety. And I just wondered if you could tell us a bit about your reasons for focusing on monsters that kind of take the form of humans, or humans as monsters in
Absolutely.
some of these
stories. So for one, the scariest monsters are the ones that look like us because they can live among us and we don't know they're there, right? Like if I saw a kaiju coming 5 miles out, I could run, I would know enough to run. I might not make it, but I could try. But when the people are the monsters, they're absolutely camouflaged, and that makes them terrifying, for one. Also, of course, the humans are always the worst of the monsters, because in, probably half-ish of my entire like monster chart here is the humans made them, or the humans' technology made them, or, a waste product of the humans poisoning the earth made them, or people are going where they don't need to go. And like, that's eco horror too, right? Like not leaving nature well enough alone.
Yep.
Like if you don't want to like pick up a parasite swimming in the Amazon River, maybe leave the Amazon River alone. Maybe don't swim in it. Maybe they don't want your body in their water either, So I think, monsters, the people are always the worst monsters, and the scariest monsters are always the people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. There is a story, I believe it is the third story in this collection, which I really enjoyed because your protagonist has a very, it's a very like unique, but also extremely understandable voice of a waitress working in a restaurant. And it's like, this character within moments of starting to read that story. That voice is so strong. And the monster reveal, which we will not get into, monster as a human reveal, is very clever. It's very cleverly done. And you kind of see it coming, and it's, things are just sort of like eerie until you get the big reveal. But it's definitely a story that people should check out and read. I believe it's called Hey Stranger.
Yep. Yep, that's one of my favorites in there. That's a lot of people's favorite in this book, and I think it's because the structure is kind of weird. Like you don't.
Yep.
It's not. And the structure is accidental, so nobody knows what we're talking about. But I wrote the first draft of this in grad school, and I had meant it to be just a second person narration story because I was like in a second person like phase.
Yep.
At the moment. But then it like got away from me, which is that happens to so many of my stories. It's like I have this intention to do this thing, and then they just get away from me. And this one did too. And so then like the voice had a personality attached, and then I had the character, and then so it became something different.
And I get it. Like within a few paragraphs, I was like, yeah, I know this character. I understand this character. This voice is so strong that it feels like this character is jumping off the page. And it's fun. And that's like, it's so easy to drop into a story like that and just like not even care where it's heading because you're just along for the ride. So that was, I really enjoyed that one. The other one that really caught me by surprise because it made me very emotional was Infested.
Yeah, that one like ripped something out of me, and it's still bleeding.
Yeah.
That was the most written story, most recently written too.
Oh,
like
really?
I just wrote that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I wrote that like a couple months ago.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah. So for people who are listening in, do you want to give sort of a brief synopsis of what that story is about?
Yeah, because I think I can talk about it and sort of give spoilers, but I think people would still like to read it.
Yeah.
So essentially my collection wasn't quite long enough. Like I needed some more stories, and I had some that fit really well with the collection already. So I moved those over, and I wanted to write something brand new. And I thought of how the hardest thing about going to therapy and sticking with therapy, because those are two different things. Sticking with it is that you have to confront so much that you've been just burying for years and years and years, like maybe in my case, 3 decades, as like survival tactics. And so you're like unburying all of those former selves, you know, and you hate some of them. Like some of them are awful and you don't want to remember them. You don't want to look at them. And so that story became one of those, you know, kind of based on a metaphor of a woman who is going to therapy and she starts getting infested. Her home is infested by past versions of herself. And she has to figure out how to get rid of them.
Yeah. I mean, it was equal parts terrifying and also impossible not to put oneself in the place of the protagonist. Equal parts terrifying as well as tender. And I think that's probably one of my favorite short stories that I've read this year, at least, if not longer than that. It really got to me. I'm a little verklempt right now.
I think I cried when I read it when I wrote it because, spoiler, you know, I've been in therapy for a few years. So it felt very real and true as I was writing it.
Yeah. So also another one to definitely check out comes actually right after Hey Stranger. And amazing that you can go from something that is making you like laugh to something that is basically making you cry within the span of a few pages. So just another testament to your wonderful writing ability.
Thank you.
And then since I haven't had the opportunity to get further in that collection, are there any other stories in that collection that you want to highlight as far as the subject of that question goes?
Yes. Yeah. So the one that I wanted to bring up is called Rest for the Wicked. And it's the cat story.
Yeah.
And it's in the tradition of so these sort of mostly movies, more movies than stories probably, but these narratives have stretched from like the 1970s into like the 1990s, and I'm sure we have more recent, but it's the creature features where we have like a fairly regular animal, but when there are too many of them, it is terrifying. You know what I mean? So this is kind of a tangent, but I used to work at a restaurant, and the owner's little children were just feral. They were just these feral little kids, and they would just run through the restaurant. And one day, one of the girls ran in, and I don't know where she got them. I will never know where she got them. Her hands, her 2 cupped hands were brimming full and spilling over with ladybugs.
And I mean, ladybugs are one of those things that like when it gets warm enough, they can just like hatch out in insane amounts. And it's
I've never seen hundreds. You know, it's like, you know, it's a whole like, oh, ladybugs are like cute and it's good luck if one lands on you. But like when you have a massive amount of them, it was disturbing in a way that's hard to describe.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, so I'm thinking of a movie called, it's just called Frogs.
Yeah.
And it's from 1972, and it stars a very young, very handsome Sam Elliott. Not that Sam Elliott ever got unhandsome, but this is like him as a young man. And it's it's not just frogs, but it's frogs and like lizards and, other sort of amphibians wreaking havoc on rich people. Like it's so good, and it's eco horror. It's so good.
Yeah.
And we watched that recently, and we also recently watched a movie from the 90s called Bats. And I love, like, they just have like the name is just the name of the animal, but it's plural. So like frogs, bats.
Maybe an exclamation point.
Yes, and sometimes there's an exclamation point. And I love that. And so back to Rest for the Wicked, it was sort of like taking something that, like little lemon jelly next to you, right? Who's so sweet, right?
Yes. Oh, so
but
sweet.
If there were so many feral cats lined up looking at you, like it's a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
The birds, Cyan, thank you. The birds, 100%. Somebody's like, bats is a good one. Yeah, it's fun. They're fun. Creature features are so fun. Especially when like the bad people get what's coming to them. So
yes.
Yep.
Agreed. I'm trying to think. I can't remember the name. I think it was called Squirm. It was just, it was a really bad, like 80s horror movie. And it involved a bunch of worms, I think. But it was featured on Mystery Science Theater 3000, which made it even better. But I just thought of that one as one of those, like, worms.
Yep. Multiply something enough times and it's terrifying.
Yeah. And speaking of frogs, there is a story that features them in your collection.
Yes,
the
that
opener.
one opens. Yep. Joiner,
the opener. So, and we're not going to give anything away. We're just going to say there are frogs and there is a story and there is horror, and you all need to read this collection.
Thank you.
There were just a few comments here. It's like, and then the next question does not have to do with this new collection. This has to do with a previous short story collection you put out that has monsters in the title, Self-Made Monsters, which is a feminist short story collection, and it features women as, the protagonists, whether they are victims or monsters themselves. And I wondered if you could just tell us a little bit about the conception of that.
Yeah. So at its core, it is feminine rage. So I think it was cathartic for me to, thanks. It was really cathartic to put together. Like each thing in it was like cathartic to write, whether the female character ends up in trouble or is the trouble. It was just really satisfying to write, satisfying to put together. And the title, and so the title and the concept kind of came to me together from a quote by author Elizabeth Hewer. And people probably know this quote or have heard of this quote. God should have made girls lethal when he made monsters of men. And that like stuck me in the chest with like a poker.
Yeah.
And it just like, it made me like stop breathing for a minute, when I read that. And it's, this idea that, right, God made men monsters, or at least, in the quote, right? And so then I started thinking of people who claim, people not pointing out any specific millionaire, billionaire people ruining our country right now, like not pointing any of them out, but how so many of them say, oh, they're like self-made men, and it's like, shut up. No, you're not. Your dad was rich. But I did, that. So all of that sort of made me think of how, like, fine, if like God didn't make us monsters, we will make our freaking selves monsters.
Yeah, that's a rad idea.
Thanks.
Yeah. Are there any particular stories in that collection that you would like to highlight that the monster fans in our audience might particularly
Okay.
want to read?
Sure. So, okay, so this is sort of a creature feature, but it's also sort of sad. It's called The Vultures Remain, and it is about vultures. The reservoir is not necessarily an animal, but it is nature, or nature claiming or reclaiming. A poem in here that I think is really fun. It's called Lake Erie Omen, and it is from the perspective of a cryptid, Lake Erie's lake monster. And that one just, I don't know, just thought it was really fun. And then two more. I guess there are a lot of monsters in here. There's a story called I Won't Call It a Monster. There's a monster in it. And that one is kind of hard for parents to read because it involves a kid. There's one called Beist Kayon Come Home. That is another cryptid story. And The Cliffs at Battery Point, another cryptid story. And Mistress Meg O'Malley is a poem about a vampire. So yeah, this is fittingly full of monsters for people.
So for the second time tonight, you've reminded me of two songs by Jonathan Colton. I'm not sure if you know his work, but he's a musician that writes like they're kind of like comedic songs, and some of them do have like a horror element to them, or at least a spooky element to them. And the first one, you were talking about a story that you'd written with zombies, and it made me think of a song that he wrote about an office culture that becomes zombified. There's one person trapped, but the song is being told from the zombies' point of view, and how they just want to eat his brains.
That's excellent. I'm going to look it up.
Yeah.
Tonight.
And then the other one is about, and it's not overtly obvious that it is from this thing's point of view, but it's basically being told from the point of view of a giant squid at the bottom of an ocean. And it's a very like sad song about why it can't have friends because it's a giant squid.
That is so sad.
And I can't think of the name for the life of me right now. But definitely worth listening to. I think you'd really enjoy his stuff.
I'm looking him up. Mistress Meg O'Malley is based on a song, or at least.
Okay.
So everybody knows the song Brandy, parentheses, You're a Fine Girl by Looking Glass. And I was listening. I love that song. Who doesn't? But I was listening to it one day and I was like, what if it were like set historically, like bartender in a port town, essentially, catering to sailors. But like, what if her name was Meg instead of Brandy, and what if she were a vampire? And so, it's like, and it rhymes. Cause it's sort of sea shanty-ish.
Okay.
Yeah.
That sounds awesome.
Thanks.
Cyan just found the name of the song. It's I Crush. It is I Crush Everything, by Jonathan Colton.
Awesome.
And I think the other song is called Re Your Brains, like an email.
Like, yeah. Nice.
But yeah, that sounds amazing. I love that you went a sea shanty route with that. And now I need that collection too.
Thanks. I'm waiting for someone who is musically talented to like write the music to that so that it can be a for real sea shanty. So anybody out there who does music, please
Yep.
please get in contact with me to give Meg some music. I would love
Yep.
that.
You guys heard it here. We're looking for sea shanty composers.
Contemporary sea shanty composers.
Yes.
Agree, Melissa. Can't go wrong with a good sea shanty.
So now we're on to my next question, which is all about, is there any particular monster that you have not written about that you have been dying to write?
Yes. Because, and I will say, well, there are two, and one of them is the vampire. And even though I've got a poem about a vampire, I actually don't have any stories about vampires.
Okay.
And it's two of the classics. It's vampires and werewolves. I love them. I will watch/read anything with a werewolf and or except for Twilight. Sorry, Twilight fans. I opted out of that one. I opted out, and I will continue to do so. So not everything, but almost anything with vampires and or werewolves. But I haven't written them because I think I'm intimidated by their iconography.
Sure.
By their vastness or something, their superiority in the world of monsters. Like it is, so it's intimidating because if people are reading, vampire or werewolf stuff, they're reading it because they like vampires and werewolves, know. So you're trying to give them enough of what they want, but it's tough too because they're such classic monsters that they've been written again and again and again and again. So it's like trying to do something that's even sort of semi-original with them while paying enough tribute to their position as prime monsters.
Yep.
It's really tough. So
yeah.
So like those are on my someday list. There's a book coming out in the fall called Vampires at Sea.
Ooh.
By Lindsay Mirbaum, and I pre-ordered it, and I can't wait for it to arrive to me. So
yeah, I was gonna say we are in the middle of a vampire renaissance right now. The last few years, last like 2 or 3 years, we've had an explosion of vampire related work. So
I love the cycles we go through of like pop culture, in general, sort of, or maybe even culture, like maybe it goes beyond pop culture, but the cycle of, vampires, werewolves, zombies. And then like, we'll be sort of like, we'll put one down and then we'll pick the next one up. And, but we're going to pick them all up again and again and again and again.
Yeah. And I understand where the fact that these monsters have been done in almost every single way, it seems, would make it difficult to want to try and do something with them again.
Yep.
My first published book was a vampire book. And I wrote three books and a short story that all took place in the same universe. And I had this whole thing plotted out so that it was taking ideas from other vampire media, but I was also trying to do a twist on it. And I also had it to the point where I was going to write like 6 books in this series. And obviously that didn't happen. I tapped out after the 3rd book. And the reason for that is because I kind of lost inspiration with it. I think that might be more to the fact that it was just such a long series versus the fact that it was actually vampires. But it's it also wasn't getting as much traction as I would have liked.
Yeah.
In a sea of other vampire things, it's really hard to make yours stand out. So
yeah, and you see a lot of even like pretty successful, and I know there are different ways we can measure that, but I'm calling out because I like her work, Rachel Harrison. So this is not her newest one, but it's one of her newer ones, So Thirsty, and it is a vampire novel. But it wasn't the first one that came out, and I'm sort of wondering, like, is it easier to sort of make a name for yourself and then get your vampire or werewolf book out there?
Maybe. Maybe. I think that Rachel Harrison is an extremely interesting author to bring up, just as a point, because she wrote her first book was something that I would not identify as being under a certain trope. And all of them are in the pink horror or, at least feminist horror genre. But that first book was not an identifiable subgenre. It was very unique and very fun. And then from there, each year, each book has changed direction to a different subgenre.
Yep.
With massive success.
Yep.
So maybe you're onto something with this, like hit it with the right book and then tackle these famous figures. Maybe. But then another. So I definitely did go through my shelves before so that I could pick out some of my favorites. So this is not exactly a werewolf novel. It's not exactly a werewolf narrative, but if you like werewolf narratives, I think you will like this, especially if you like feminist horror. But Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder is so wild, So maybe this is like a breakout because she didn't do something we were familiar with. It was like sort of adjacent, but not what we've seen before. Yeah. So it took the werewolf genre and turned it on its head a bit. Yeah.
So, and I have my first novel is coming out next year, also with Water Tower Hill Publishing, and it has a monstrous figure as its protagonist. I don't want to give too much away, but a monstrous figure, but not one of these classic monsters that one day I will tackle, maybe.
Well, is that one something that has been announced, or is it still kind of?
Yes, it's not a secret. So it is called Beth Bites Back.
Ooh.
And it is the first of a planned trilogy.
Okay.
Featuring Beth Bryant, the Beth Bryant series. So, yeah, Beth Bites Back next spring, 26.
All right. Okay, so everybody needs to be on the lookout for Beth Bites Back, which, I'm already intrigued, so I will definitely be on the lookout for it. Oh my God. Jeez. He sneezed and I got scared. All this talk of monsters. My next question, and the related question, is are there any monsters that have stayed with you or haunted you since you wrote them?
You know, weirdly, this little creature feature I wrote, the thing from it. So it's in an anthology called Screams, edited by Judith Sonnet.
Okay.
No, I'm a liar. That's a different one. I'm
Oh.
sorry. That's a different monster story. This one is in Nature Triumphs, which was put out by Dark Moon Rising. And it's called Throw It Back. And it's this, it's a little thing. It's not a big thing. It's a little thing. And there's something that like breaks my heart about it, but also creeps me out. And it stays with me, that little guy.
It feels fishing related. Yeah.
It is fishing related. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have a lot of stories about water. Like so many stories about water. Creeks and ponds and lakes and rivers and.
Well, I mean, the water is scary.
The water is scary. And I grew up, I still live here, or I moved back here, but grew up right next to Lake Erie. Mm-hmm. So I guess water has always been a part of my life. But it's kind of surprising to me how often it keeps popping up. Yeah. In all of these different stories and poems as well.
Well, that could be the basis for a new short story collection at some point. You'll have to work a canning story into that somehow. And then my last question in that round of questions is to tell us about your singular scariest monster that you've created.
Now so I knew this was coming, but this is the one I didn't have a great answer for.
And I guess I'll stretch it so that it's not, it doesn't have to be a monster that is entirely made up. And it can be any kind of monster, but definitely one that scared you the most.
All right. I'm going back to the frogs in Joiner. I'm going to go back to the frogs in Joiner. And they're not quite the frogs of Sam Elliott's Frogs. Mm-hmm. They're not quite featured in the same way. But that's based on real life, and they were really scary.
Okay. Well, the opening story in the new collection, everybody. So if you want to get haunted by frogs, you need to read it. That brings us to our sort of our end of the line questions. These are questions that I ask everybody that comes on the show. Okay. And they're very fun. It's gonna probably bring up your massive sheet of paper here. And that is to talk about your favorite instances of monsters in books, in TV shows, in music or games or movies.
Yep. So I did think of a bunch. And so everybody knows whenever anyone asks me for my favorite anything, I freeze up because I can never pick favorite anything. But I did put together a list of movies and TV shows. Because I've talked about some. I can bring up some books again as well. But just to call out some shows and movies I've really loved featuring monsters. This one is it's not super well known. It's called Paranormal, and it is, I think it's still on Netflix. And it stars Ahmed Amin, and it is an Egyptian show. So it does have subtitles. So if you can't do subtitles, then maybe it's not for you. But it is just this great show with this protagonist who, he's just like this shy middle-aged nerd. Like he doesn't want to be involved in any of this. So it's really great. And it's sort of a Monsters of the Week setup. Love Bubba Hotep. Like I did an entire podcast on Bubba Hotep with James Sabata because I love it so much. Yeah. I love nursing home horror. So it's like nursing home horror plus a monster. It's like it's ticking a lot of boxes.
Gotcha.
And the movie stars Bruce Campbell. And of course, Bruce Campbell is like excellent in everything, but also want to give credit to Joe R. Lansdale, who wrote the novella on which the movie is based. A lot of people know and love the show Penny Dreadful. It had 3 seasons. Eva Green, Reeve Carney, Josh Hartnett, Harry Treadaway, others, taking some of the figures that we recognize from Victorian era sort of horror literature and putting them all together. That's a super fun one. We talked about Tremors. Tremors is just so fun. Tremors is great. Kevin Bacon.
Tremors is amazing.
Yes.
Horror comedy.
Yep. Good stuff. Ginger Snaps. I feel like that's another one that I couldn't leave off.
That made me think of your book. Or I was trying to remember the name of Ginger Snaps when you said the name of your upcoming book, and for some reason it wasn't coming to my head.
Yep, that one is a good one, and that was early 2000s, I think. Catherine Isabel, and it is that's a werewolf one, everybody. So make sure you see it if you haven't. And then I got picky about. I called out True Blood because I really enjoyed the first 3 seasons, but I thought it jumped the shark after the 3rd season. The first 5-ish seasons of Supernatural, I really loved it when it was more Monster of the Week style. And I think they ran out of ideas, but the show kept going. The first 2 Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser and Rachel Weisz, not the 3rd. Don't waste your time on the 3rd.
Yep.
Cyan had called it out, but The Birds, it's just super famous and like iconic. An American Werewolf in London, also like we shouldn't leave that off the list because that's just such a good one. So that's everything that I have down as having enjoyed a lot, and I'm sure there are more. You know, I did go see Nosferatu in theaters, and I gotta say I didn't love it. That one disappointed me.
I still have not seen it. It's
I won't
on.
give away anything, but I didn't love it.
Yeah, it's on Peacock. If you have that and you want to watch it, I just haven't gotten there yet. I'm excited about the whole Victorian Gothic vibe. I could care less, obviously, about the whole sensual stuff that's going on. But otherwise, everything else about it is intriguing. And there is a TV show that I thought about that I've not thought about in years that only had 2 seasons, and it was called Special Unit 2. And it was a like police procedural type show, but it was a comedy, and it was about this sort of underground police department that hunted monsters, basically. And they were not your typical monsters. They were very weird, almost like kind of Doctor Who like monsters. Like they had a plastic surgery monster in one episode that was made from the illegal like waste from this plastic surgery plant. And spider monster, a woman at some point. Just like odd choices for monsters, but also just a really fun show.
Well, you just made me think of one that should have been at the top of my list because I love it. I love the show and the movie. They're different, both done so well. What We Do in the Shadows.
Yes.
So good. So good.
Yeah.
And then that also made me think of a couple of other shows. So Wellington Paranormal, which I believe is set in New Zealand, kind of has that.
Also...
it's almost like a spoof on the X-Files. And of course, the X-Files should be on our lists too. But
that's also Taika Waititi, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes. And then there was a there was a show that only ran for like one short season years ago. I don't even know if anyone can find it anywhere, but it was called Death Valley. And it was a supernatural Reno 911.
Okay.
Like that show, it was like it had like some dumb humor. Like they strapped a zombie with a bomb and they called it a bombie, and I laughed so hard. So hard. But so if anyone can get their hands on that short season, I was so mad when they canceled it. And every show I think is really funny they cancel. So I think maybe I have a really bad sense of humor.
No, I feel the same. Any show that I like, they cancel. So I get it. There were a couple that were mentioned in the chat here. We've got The Cave, and then we've also got Grimm, and neither one of those I have seen. But the other thing that just crossed my mind was this. It's a reality TV show, and it's about like a bunch of mountain men. I think it's called Mountain Men, and they're trying to hunt Bigfoot. And it is just terrible. It's like it's just a bunch of redneck mountain guys trying to hunt Bigfoot, and they're trying to come up with like all these traps every episode, and nothing for like,
so many.
I think I would watch the first season.
But like, good for them for having a hobby.
Yeah. You're right.
Good for you. Good for you.
It's called Mountain Monsters, apparently. And then Cyan mentioned that Death Valley is also able to be purchased.
Also, yeah, ever buy it. It is worth it. It is worth the purchase.
Yeah, any other
I wanted to call out some books. So I did call out Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder and So Thirsty by Rachel Harrison. Read those recently. I wanted to call this one out by Cat, The Wild Dark. There are okay, I don't want to give away any spoilers. There are some creatures in here that are so terrifying. So terrifying. So get The Wild Dark.
I appreciate that gets a mention. Thank you.
That's it. That's in the stack. And then I just read The Javelina by James Sabata, and it's comedy horror, and it's like I laughed out loud. So,
there is a great. I think it might be Australian. Maybe there's a movie about a killer wild boar or something like that. That just made me think of that. I think I watched maybe 20 minutes of it.
We got to bring up Cocaine Bear because I am putting Cocaine Bear on the list of like man-made monsters because it's like science, tech, or contamination. Yeah. And I'm going to consider like dropping a bunch of cocaine in the wilderness to be contamination.
Sure.
So, so Cocaine Bear's on the list too.
And there's every iteration of cocaine-infused animal is now hitting the movie list. They've done a cocaine shark. There is now there is a cocaine alligator movie, which I don't remember what it's called, but I was just very struck that it's like, okay, this is not slowing down. It probably should. But. It
probably should. Like sometimes just like do it once, do it well, and move on. Yeah. But if there's money left in the sponge, Hollywood's going to keep squeezing.
Yeah. So. Well, great. We've covered a bunch of stuff there. Do you enjoy writing monster horror over other kinds of horror?
Okay, so I think that monster horror is my favorite kind of comedy horror to write. So I've got like different categories, So if it's comedy horror, I like monsters. If it is the more quiet horror stuff that I write a lot of, and grief horror that I write a lot of, then ghosts win.
Hmm.
And then
Yeah.
I guess water wins everywhere and everyone and everything. So scary
All right.
water.
It's the triangle. Yeah,
I like to
cool.
write about witches too, and those I don't know if we could fairly put those on the list. So
Yeah, it's hard because like they can be. I would like to say they can be because if you can have vampires on that list,
mhm,
just human that has been changed into
yeah,
uh, an undead creature that drinks blood. You can have zombies on that list. Witches are basically just a human type of monster.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, they count.
All right, they count. So I have several witch stories too, I guess.
Okay.
Hmm. Hmm. One of them is a witch nursing home story. So
Oh man.
hit it twice. That is in Soul Scream, the
Okay.
anthology. Someday I'm gonna, because I have these like random horror comedy stories just like out and about. So one day I will collect them and put them together.
Yeah. Nice.
There aren't enough of them yet, but one day.
Yeah, that's I always appreciate horror comedy. And I've never read a collection of horror comedy. I'm sure they exist.
Mhm.
Um but yeah, that could be fun.
Yeah, Lindsay Goddard is putting one out
Okay.
called Tales from the Lark Side.
Hmm.
So that is one I know of for sure. And then uh, a comedy horror author. So if you're just like looking for comedy horror, DM Gay
Hmm.
has a ton of comedy horror out, and her stuff is great.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our show. Uh thank you so much for coming out and talking all about monsters. Did we hit everything on your piece of
I mean, we
paper?
didn't hit every category on the chart, but that's okay. It's there's as we said, there are so many monsters to enjoy.
Mhm.
You know, they're never all going to fit on one chart, so it's
Yeah, that's fair.
one chart
Um,
cannot do them justice.
no, one page cannot do them justice, probably.
Nope. I have so
Well,
many good recommendations now that I will be going off to find. So thank you for those.
yeah, sure. And
Mhm.
thank you for giving us all lots of things to read that we may not have otherwise thought of to check out,
Sure.
including the 6 o'clock room. Is it the 6 o'clock? No, it's a 6 o'clock
Clock House,
house.
which is
God,
actually the name of a greenhouse, which shows you why there's a greenhouse on the cover. So
yeah,
6 o'clock house and other strange
and
tales.
other strange tales. That is out now from Water Tower Hill Press. Um, go find it.
Go find it. Ebook, paperback, hardcover.
All the things.
Yep.
Um,
All the things, all the places.
cool. And thank you, everybody in the audience, for coming and hanging out with us tonight. Lots and lots of options that came through in the comments that we really enjoy. So thank you for that. Next week, which is March, we're into March now. March 6th, we will have Sam Richard on the show, who is also the editor in chief of Weird Punk Books. And we'll be talking all about his latest book. And we will be, oh dear. Usually I write down what the subject is that we're that we're discussing. And I have the memory of a goldfish. So I
People can just be surprised. It'll be good.
completely and utterly have forgotten. No, I'm going to find it right here. We're going to talk about weird horror. There it is. We're going to talk about weird horror with Sam next week. And it's going to be really fun. So everybody should stop by and hang out. And until then, we hope that you have a good night and a great weekend.
Yeah. Thank you to Kat. Thank you to the people hanging out.
Yeah. Anytime. Bye, guys.